The lie about feminine empowerment. There is a word that was supposed to set women free. A word that became a movement, a marketing strategy, a cultural mandate. This word is empowerment. But what if, in some ways, it became just another thing women were expected to perform? What feels off about empowerment is not just the word itself, it's the entire culture that has formed around it. Empowerment today often carries an unspoken pressure to do more, to be more, to produce more. It promotes a constant state of output where rest feels like failure and slowing down feels like falling behind. It encourages pushing past limits, stretching beyond what the body and the spirit ask for, constantly extracting more from ourselves, from others, even from the world around us. But this energy is not neutral. It is directional. It is outward, forceful, driven. And for 2, maybe 3 generations now, this has been presented as the only valid way of existing in the world. In that sense, empowerment has become less about supporting women and more about reshaping them to fit into a system built on different principles. The principle of performance, productivity, competition, and constant expansion. And what gets lost in that process is the space for softness and femininity. There is very little room left for stillness, inward reflection, for emotional depth, and for nurturing, not just for the others, but also for oneself to start with. The rhythms that were once intuitive, being in tune with cycles, with rest, with nature, with renewal, have quietly disappeared from what we consider successful, from what we consider valuable. Instead, the model presented to women is clear. Be fast, be efficient, be productive, be good looking. Go out into the world, perform, achieve, accumulate, and keep on going no matter what. And while this may create a sense of independence or accomplishment or even success, it comes with a cost, because many women are not feeling fulfilled. They feel exhausted, disoriented, but sometimes they also can live on autopilot, meaning disconnected from whatever feeling they have inside of them. These women are trying to thrive in environments that require a constant state of outward energy. By participating in highly competitive, performance-driven spaces, they begin to adapt and mirror that same masculine energy. Over time, this doesn't just become something they do, it becomes something they are expected to be. And once that shift happens, it becomes difficult to return. Not because femininity disappears, but because the world no longer creates space for it. So when we talk about empowering women, we have the question what we are really encouraging here. So, are we empowering women to reconnect with themselves? Or are we teaching them to adapt, to perform, to reshape their behavior, and even their identity to fit into a system that was never designed for feminine energy to thrive in? You can see it everywhere once you start to notice. In media, for example, certain archetypes of the successful women are constantly repeated. Think of characters like Miranda Priestley in The Devil Wears Prada, where success is embodied through emotional detachment, relentless standards, and a kind of cold authority. The ideal is a woman who always is composed, always in control, always performing at the highest level regardless of emotional cost. This image is polished, powerful, aspirational, but it also reflects a very specific kind of energy, one that prioritizes dominance, efficiency, and external achievement. This narrative suggests that a woman to be respected must perform in high-pressure and performance-driven ways, just as men were supposed to do. And this narrative extends far beyond film, Even in everyday life, the same dynamic shows up. The standard routine represented as the ideal. Work all day, go to the gym, stay disciplined, optimize your body, optimize your time, keep improving, of course. While there is no inherently wrong with discipline or movement, the way it is framed is often rooted in constant output. It becomes another form of pressure, another system to perform with. Social behavior reflects this too. The strong, independent woman is frequently portrayed as someone who mirrors traditionally competitive behaviors. Even leisure starts to resemble performance. And the deep question is not whether women can do these things, it is why these are the things being represented as the standard to aspire to. Because if you think about it, there is very little guidance on what it means to be rooted in a softer, more inward way of being. There is little modeling of slowness, reflection, emotional depth, or connection to natural rhythms. Those expressions are rarely highlighted, rarely celebrated, often dismissed as less valuable. And this becomes even more complex in relationships. Modern dynamics often emphasizes equality in sense of sameness, sharing identical roles, operating in the exact same ways. While fairness is important, sameness can sometimes blur the natural differences in how people give, receive, and express themselves. When both people are operating from the same outward driven energy, something subtle can be lost. The sense of complementarity, of balance between different ways of being. We're not just seeing a shift in roles, we're seeing a shift in energy, where one mode of being has become dominant, and everything else has slowly been pushed to the margins. Femininity, huh? So, how to define it? I can tell you, no words are capable of defining that landscape that rises, falls, expands, and lives inside of a woman. It's not always logical, even. It's intuitive, definitely. And it feels also like a world you are nurturing, singing to, making magic to, aspiring to, imagining. There is a deep sensitivity, and it is not weakness. No, 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 no. You notice shifts in tone, in energy, in expression. It can be a shift between joy and grief at the same time, that sometimes you need to breathe because it's quite intense. It's almost like a pull towards a connection with the unseen, another dimension, a space from which you can create. It's not always in a maternal way, but in a way that says, I see you, I feel you, you are safe here. And yet, there is also a fierce instinct to protect what you love. Something soft that can become immovable. There is also creativity. It's not about making things with your hands, but it's rather like an idea that you put into being and you think about it and you strategize and you reflect on it. And also relationships, moments, meaning. It's a quiet power, almost like a focus on your ideas, the emotions they bring, and you're manifesting them into reality. That is typically feminine, and some call it magic. Now, what frustrates me the most about this topic of empowerment is how deeply normalized and rooted it has all become. Women today are not just encouraged, but they are expected to move through the world in a constant state of performance, to work, to achieve, to build status, to prove themselves in systems they were never designed with their natural rhythms in mind. And the most unsettling part of this, we don't even question it anymore. Because the alternative, a different, more inward way of being, has almost disappeared from visibility. It is no longer taught, no longer modeled, no longer passed down in a way we can recognize or access from generations to generations. Nope. So many women don't even know that there is another way to exist. And that creates a kind of silent disorientation, a feeling of being out of place, of not fully belonging in a world you were born into, of trying to succeed in something that deep down inside just doesn't feel aligned. The modern lifestyle leaves very little room for femininity. The rhythm becomes work, consume, perform, repeat. Even rest is scheduled, optimized, turned into another form of productivity. There is no real space to just be a woman. No space to sit with yourself, to feel, to reflect, to connect with something deeper than external output. Even the body begins to reflect this disconnection. Natural cycles, emotions, and signals are often treated as inconveniences, things you have to manage, suppress, or fix. But what if some of these experiences are not problems to eliminate, but messages to listen to? There was a time where these qualities, the feminine qualities, were not invisible. They were passed down through stories, through lived experiences, through the quiet influence of women who carried a different kind of wisdom, not defined by titles or achievements, but by the way they moved through life, the way they held others together, the way they created meaning. And that kind of presence is becoming really rare. Not because it no longer exists, but because it is no longer recognized or rewarded. So the frustration is not just about what is happening externally, it is about what is being forgotten internally. A way of being that cannot be measured, optimized, or fully explained, but that, when lost, leaves something behind that no amount of success can replace. For me, this is not just a concept, it is something I truly lived. From a very young age, I stepped into responsibility. When my mother decided to study later in life, I naturally took on more at home, taking care of the household, helping raise my sister, managing things that, looking back, no child should fully carry. I became capable very early, independent, and reliable. But this constant pressure also disconnected me from what it truly meant to simply be. I followed the path that was expected of me. I studied, I succeeded, I did everything right. And eventually, I stepped into what's supposed to be the reward for all of that effort: a career, a relationship, a stable life. I became a lawyer living in Paris, building what it looked like to be successful. But I remember one very specific moment, sitting at my desk, staring at my computer, and realizing this is it. This is what the rest of my life is supposed to look like. And the feeling that came over me wasn't pride, it was suffocation. I felt like a bird trapped into a cage. I literally felt like I had to hold my breath all day long, contain myself, suppress myself, perform, deliver, stay focused, stay productive. And then, at the end of the day, I was allowed to exhale, briefly, before starting it all over again the next day. That rhythm was just slowly breaking me down. Outside of work, I found one space where I could connect with something else. I started pole dancing, not as a performance, but as an expression. It was one of the first times I felt truly present in my body. There was no pressure to achieve, no expectation to prove anything, just movement, music, and a sense of freedom I couldn't find anywhere else. And that contrast became impossible to ignore. Because the more I felt alive in those moments, the more empty my daily life started to feel. At work, I began to notice something unsettling. People who had spent their entire lives there would tell me they were just waiting for their retirement, that their whole life had been just about enduring it, holding on, counting down the years. As a young woman, I felt the reality they were telling me deep inside of my bones, and something inside of me was just screaming, "Hell no, I just don't want this for my life." It didn't take long before my body started to respond. I was constantly sick, fevers, swollen glands, exhaustion. My energy was just gone. My mind was heavy, and slowly I started losing any sense of meaning. There was even a point where I felt completely disconnected from life itself, where I couldn't understand why I was doing what I had to do every day. I was just paying rent to go to the job and the job to pay the rent. A loop that felt just endless and without meaning. Even the people around me began to notice. My workplace, for example, they brought in a psychologist to keep me functioning. But even in those conversations, the truth became clear. This life wasn't aligned with who I was. It was my father who finally said it out loud. He told me to come back home, to stop, to rest, to choose something else. And that is where, for the first time, I will stop to try to meet expectations. I walked away from the job, from the life I had built, even from the relationship I was in at the time. Not because it was easy, but because I couldn't continue living in a way that felt so deeply wrong. And when you think about it, I had done everything I was supposed to do. I had been the good girl, the successful one, the one people were proud of. But I was completely empty. So I chose differently. Because deep down, I knew something essential. I could not thrive in a life that required me to constantly operate in a way that didn't feel natural to me. I could not build my existence on pure output, pressure, and performance. There just simply had to be another way. So, let's conclude. Maybe the real question is not how women can become more empowered within the current system, because it is failing us, but how we can reconnect with a completely different way of being. A way that allows us to be more feminine, to create, to nurture, to live from a deeper, more intuitive force. Even in a world that constantly pushes us to do the opposite. Perhaps true fulfillment doesn't come from adapting more successfully to pressure. Perhaps it comes from remembering who we were before the performance, before all the expectations, before the job, before the career, before we were told that the only way to be powerful was to become something other than what we naturally are. Maybe it's not that women are doing something wrong. Maybe they were never shown another way. So if this video resonates with something deep inside of you, I would like to know what it is. Just sit for a moment, feel deep inside of your essence, and tell me what you actually feel. What is the truth that calls inside of you? Leave a word in the comments, or a sentence, or just sit quietly with it for a while and try to be honest with yourself. What is it you truly want? What is the life you aspire to? What do you want to create? What are your ideas? Beyond the world's possibilities, beyond getting your nails done, your hair done, having a job, a career, what is it you truly want? This channel is made to explore femininity, the real one, the one nobody ever talks about anymore, and belongs to grandmother's tales from long time ago, before your mother was born, before your grandmother was born, but a tale that has been handed over from generation to generation and lost in a current system where you also are pushed to perform like a man. I'm curious about your story.